Alright. Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. Pagpapatuloy natin yung ating lecture. Nag-umpisa muna tayo sa introduction sa economics at saka papunta na tayo dun sa definition ng microeconomics. Pagkatapos itutuloy natin doon sa discussion tungkol sa mga basic concepts na kakailanganin yung matandaan at maunawaan sa pag-aaral natin ng microeconomics. No? So ulitin ko, itong kurso na to ay ang microeconomics, basic na to, fundamental to. No? When I say fundamentals, this is not necessarily just introduction to economics. This is really a little bit of examination of the issues that microeconomics encounters and also analyzes. Okay. So having said that, papaalala ko ulit, pagka nag-screen share ako, hindi ko makikita yung chat box, hindi ko makikita kapag may nagtaas ng kamay. So if you'd like to clarify something or meron kayong hindi nakikita, halimbawa hindi na pala gumagana yung aking slide, you would have to speak up kasi I won't be able to see you. Okay, this is unique to tablet. No? Hindi naman ganito kapag sa computer ako nag-zoom. Kaya lang, I need the pen for the tablet, no? Kaya, for the lecture, so kailangan mag-tablet ako. Okay, sige, mag-screen share lang ako. Dali lang. Okay, so nakikita niyo uli yung aking slide. Now, this is the slide from last lecture. Babalikan lang natin sandali, balik-aralan natin sandali yung mga pag-usapan na natin nung nakaraan, nang sa ganon ay may continuity yung ating lecture. No? So ang huli nating napag-usapan, nung huli tayong nagkita, ay ang, yung bakit may economics, ano ang gamit ng economics, anong organization economics, no? May sinasagot siyang tatlong tanong, ano yung tipo ng economic organization, yung meron kang command economy, pure market economy, at saka mixed economy. Tapos nag-umpisa na tayong mag-discuss tungkol doon sa mga basic concepts, mga fundamental concepts sa microeconomics, na mga konsepto na kakailanganin yung maintindihan, nang sa ganon, makasunod kayo doon sa mga iba nating discussions. Okay, so ang una sa mga konsepto na yan ay yung production possibility frontier. Now, nakatali ito doon sa una nating pinag-usapan kung bakit merong economics. No? Kasi sa economics, pinag-aaralan kung paanong gagamitin ang mga tinatawag na scarce. Alright? No, scarce resource. Pag sinabing scarce, may wanting, no? Or may hindi sapat. No? Katulad nga ng isang this definition ng isang kaklase ninyo, no? Hindi sapat. Pag sinabing hindi sapat, hindi ibig sabihin ay kakaunti. Relative to demand yun. Okay? Hindi sapat kasi mas malaki ang demand kaysa sa supply. Okay, so dahil dito merong isang unang framework, unang konsepto natin, unang framework na matatawag. Pag sinabing framework, isang illustration kung paano maiintindihan ang mundo. No? So kung paano maiintindihan ng isang discussion. So itong unang framework na ginamit natin ay yung production possibilities frontier. No? So dito, nakalahad kung paano meron tayong dalawang goods. So for simplicity, we assume na there are only two goods that are being produced in the economy. Of course, this is an oversimplification because I know there are like hundreds of thousands of goods that are being produced. Okay, so for simplicity, para lang maintindihan natin yung konsepto ng production possibilities frontier, kunyari dalawa lang ang goods that are being produced in an economy. So guns and butter, representing defense and food. Okay, so given this, so lahat ng resources meron yung bansa. Ito yung representation ng kung ano yung maximum amount ng guns at maximum amount ng butter na pwedeng i-produce ng isang bansa, and then all the combinations in between. So ibig sabihin, pag ginamit mo lahat ng resources mo para mag-produce ng guns, then ang maximum amount na pwede mong i-produce ay nandito sa area na to. Kapag lahat naman ng resources ginamit mo to produce butter, nandito ka. Tapos itong mga portion nito in between are different combinations. So some guns, some butter dito sa point na to, some gun, some butter. Itong point na to, some guns, some butter. Remember na itong part na to ay numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Ganun din ito. No, ganyan ang itsura ng graph. So ibig sabihin kapag ka nandito ka, there are 4, let's say, 4 guns na pwedeng i-produce at 3 butter. Okay? Alright. So yan ang unang konsepto. Pagkatapos, pinag-usapan na rin natin yung infeasibility at saka inefficiency ng points. Kung ang isang ekonomiya ay nasa ilalim ng PPF, inefficient siya kasi meron siyang resources na hindi pa nagagamit. Pag sinabi nating efficiency sa konsepto ng economics, lahat ay ginagamit. Hindi yung konsepto na parang, uy, dapat magsisave o magtitipid, wag ko munang gamitin lahat. That is inefficient kasi meron kang goods or services na hindi na po-produce dahil tinitipid mo yung yung resources mo, no? Ang hindi pagtitipid ang hinahanap sa efficiency. Ang hinahanap dito ay yung least waste o merong pinaka-counting tapon. Sa lahat ng resources mo ay nagagamit pero maximum amount of production. Okay? Kaya ang point B is inefficient. Point A naman is infeasible kasi hindi maaabot yan ng production possibilities frontier mo kasi sobra na yan sa resources na abot. Okay, kaya siya frontier kasi yan yung maximum amount na maaaring i-produce ng isang bansa o ng isang ekonomiya. Okay. Oops. Alright. So ano ang maaaring makapagpa-shift ng production possibilities frontier? Pinag-usapan na rin natin ito, quantity and quality of resources, tools and technology, at yung mga non-obvious, no? O hindi obvious na mga variables katulad ng kultura, kapag halimbawa biglang naging hindi na nagkaroon ng Filipino time. Hindi, halimbawa traffic na lang. Ang traffic ay isang constraint to production kasi na maraming nasasayang na oras. But it's a given. Ganun yung estado ng bansa o ng ekonomiya sa Pilipinas. Kung isang araw na wala ang traffic, that could cause your PPF to shift kasi suddenly may isang constraint na nakalagan o napakawalan. Alright? So maaaring mag-shift ng yung production possibilities frontier kasi ang isang constraint mo ay nawala, which is traffic. Okay? Do all countries have the same or identical PPFs? Pag-usapan na natin to, hindi. Magkakaibang bansa, magkakaibang resources, magkakaibang technology, magkakaibang kultura, magkakaiba ng mga sitwasyon. Then, ang mga PPFs ng iba't ibang bansa ay magkakaiba. Okay. Now, isang konsepto na iniwanan natin nung nakaraan, yung konsepto ng opportunity cost, ng what could have been or the trade-off. Tulad ng nasabi ko nung nakaraan, sa accounting, ang itinuturing lang na cost ay yung nabibili o yung what's purchased, no, in the let's say at the stores, yung may resibo, yun ang costs sa production. Sa economics, that's just one type of cost. The other is what's called opportunity cost or what could have been. Halimbawa, yung isang laborer, no, isang tao na nagtrabaho para doon sa, let's say, isang restaurant. Halimbawa, no? Halimbawa lang naman. Si isang artista ang may-ari ng restaurant. Okay? So kapag di ba nakikita niyo may mga artista na sila yung nagso-serve sa kanilang restaurant, di ba? So ngayon, kapag kinalculate mo yung cost according to accounting costs or accounting method, ang pasweldo mo doon sa artista na yon would be, let's say, kung magkano ang sweldo mo sa waiter. Halimbawa, so pag binilang mo yung costing noon, halimbawa, ang sweldo ng waiter, halimbawa lang naman is 15,000 a month, yun ang, pagka nag-calculate ka ng cost, 15,000 a month ang nakalagay ng labor cost. Pero, sa economics, ang tinuturing na ang isang approach to costing ay hindi yung mismong yung kumbaga pinasweldo, but yung opportunity cost niya. Halimbawa, sumusweldo sana yung artista, but hindi naman siya masyadong sikat. No? So maaaring, kung hindi siya nagtatrabaho o hindi siya nag-serve, hindi siya nag-waiter sa araw na yon, at siya ay meron sanang gig somewhere, alright, na tinanggihan niya kasi gusto niyang mag-serve sa restaurant na yon, let's say, ang halaga nung gig sana na yon ay 20,000, na So ang opportunity cost niya ay 20,000. Alright, so kung pag biniling natin ang cost doon sa araw na yon, doon sa operation ng restaurant, dapat hindi 15,000 kung hindi 20,000 ang ilalagay mo kasi yun yung give up noong waiter mo na para makapagtrabaho. So ang opportunity cost ay isang cost na alam natin conceptually pero hindi siya binibilang sa actual accounting cost. Okay, so this is the trade-off. Ang iba-ibang ano ang cost ng pagpunta? Well, hindi pala tayo face-to-face, no? Pero halimbawa kasi normally tatanong ko sa klase yan eh. Ano ang opportunity cost ng inyong pagpunta sa klase? Well, mamamasahe kayo. Sasabihin, okay, anong cost ng pagpunta nyo sa klase? Ang accounting cost nyo would be pamasahe, maaaring bumili kayo, kumain kayo, no? Kasi breakfast kayo, etc. So yung cost na yon would be your accounting cost. Pero ang idadagdag natin yung opportunity cost. Kung wala kayo sa klase, anong ginagawa nyo? Maaaring natutulog kayo. Alright? Kung natutulog kayo, ano ang halaga nung satisfaction ng pagtulog? Yan sasabihin nyo, well, that would be 100 pesos worth ng satisfaction sana. Okay, so yun ang cost. Of course, ibabalance natin kasi ang mga cost na yan sa benefit. Alright, kapag mas mataas ang benefit kesa sa cost, the rational human being will undertake that activity. Diba? Kapag mas mataas ang cost kesa sa benefit, including opportunity cost ito ha. Kapag mas mataas ang cost kesa sa benefit, hindi mo gagawin yon kasi rational ka eh. You wouldn't want to do something that has more cost than benefit. Okay? So yun ang very basic representation and explanation regarding opportunity cost. Okay, ang efficiency naman, which is the second concept to remember, ay yung sense that you use the resources to the maximum effectiveness. Kaya ito sinasabi ko, di ba, inefficient kapag nandun ka sa ilalim ng PPF. Kasi meron kang resources na hindi ginagamit. So, kapag ka-efficient, ang ibig lang sabihin nun, yung maximum effectiveness ng resources mo. So ano ang maximum amount or maximum number, maximum quantity of goods that you can produce from your current amount or quantity of resources or inputs. Alright? So, pag sinabing productive efficiency, which an economy cannot produce more of a good without producing less of another good. Ibig sabihin, may trade-off na. Alright? May opportunity cost na tinatawag kapag nandun ka na sa PPF. Yung mismo, kung matatandaan nyo, di ba, yung pinaka-bilog, yung pinaka-curve sa PPF, ano na yun? Any point on that curve is productive efficiency. Okay? Ibig sabihin, hindi ka na pwedeng mag-produce o makapagdagdag ng production without sacrificing the production of the other good. Alright? So ito yung PPF natin, kung matatandaan nyo. Diba? Any point, this is guns, this is butter. Any point on the PPF is productive efficiency. Kasi if you want to produce, let's say, nandito ka sa point na to. Let's say this is 5 and 3. 5 guns, 3 butter. When you want to produce more butter, let's say you want to increase it to 4, you can only do that by sacrificing guns. So magiging, let's say, 4 na lang to. So bababa siya. Productive efficiency ka na kasi you can't produce one of the good without sacrificing the other good. Okay? So that's productive efficiency. Oops, sorry. Okay, so ultimately, we study economics because we would like to address all of these issues. So first is economics allows us to discern the central issues that society faces. And then economics also provides us potential solutions to the gaps and problems that society faces. In other words, may economics kasi mayroong mga issues and problems sa ekonomiya o sa society, sa lipunan na kailangang gawan ng solusyon. Alright, so ang pag-aaral na ito ay nabuo dahil may mga issues na kailangang harapin, merong kailangang gawan ng paraan sa lipunan. So ang objective ay upang mapaganda o mapataas ang antas ng kaligayahan o ng welfare ng bawat ng karamihan, no, kung di man bawat siguro, ng karamihan ng mga mamamayan na nasa lipunan. Okay. So, dito naman, take-off point na natin, what is microeconomics? Okay, microeconomics is a branch of economics that examines the behavior of individuals and firms and how they decide regarding the use of limited or scarce resources. Okay, so ang microeconomics, so dalawa yan, di ba? Kung matatandaan nyo, sabi ko, may dalawang branches ng economics, so main branches, microeconomics and macroeconomics. So macroeconomics is your Econ 100.2, macroeconomics is Econ 100.1, microeconomics is Econ 100.2. So dito sa microeconomics, we examine the behavior of individuals and firms in contrast to macroeconomics, which examines or studies the behavior of the economy as in its entirety or as a whole. So in microeconomics, we try to analyze how individuals, meaning consumers, individual people, and as well as individual firms, how they decide what what are we interested in, how they decide regarding the use and consumption of limited and of scarce resources and limited goods. Because the production of goods, because resources are scarce, it means also that goods will be limited as well. No? So in other words, because goods and services cannot be infinitely produced, therefore, the allocation of these goods and services is also something that we would like to examine, because at the end of the day, we want the goods and services to satisfy or to cause the most amount of happiness or satisfaction. And so one of the main problems that we address in microeconomics is how we're going to find that allocation of goods and services that will bring about the maximum amount of happiness or welfare. All right. So, of course, in relation to that, we would like the resources to produce as much goods and services that's possible, given the technology and given the amount of inputs and resources, natural resources that are available to a country or to a community. So, we begin by asking, what is the objective of the individual? Meaning, the person, what's the objective of a person? What is the objective of the firm? Objective in what? In engaging in activities, meaning in engaging in buying goods or services, or in engaging in whatever activity. Kasi whatever activity that you engage in can be considered a good. I like, because it's something that you're interested in, something that gives you happiness. And there is a cost to every activity that you engage in. It's either in terms of actual cost, like your fare, your jeepney fare, etc., but also in terms of opportunity cost or the time that you give up in order to engage in that activity. No? So kapag ka merong isang nilalang, isang tao that engages in an activity, he or she does so because there is an expectation of benefit, di ba? Hindi naman kayo kikilos o hindi kayo gagawa ng isang bagay na wala kayong expectation ng happiness or expectation ng satisfaction. Kasi irrational yon, di ba? Bakit ka pumapasok sa eskwela? May expectation ka ng perhaps long-term benefits, but benefit. Bakit ka mag-absent? Meron ka ding expectation of benefit, di ba? So, lahat ng bagay na ginagawa na, ba't ka nagtatanim? Bakit ka nagwawalis? Ba't ka tumutulong sa kapwa? Bakit ka tumutulong sa gobyerno? etc. etc. Lahat ng bagay na yan ay mayroong expectation ng benefit doon sa kumikilos o doon sa tao na o individual na gumagawa nung kung anumang bagay yon. Ganon din naman sa firm, o ganon din naman sa isang entity or supplier, no, kung producer. Ano objective ng isang firm? Well, kung ang individual ay kumikilos, dahil meron siyang expectation, meron siyang gusto niyang magkaroon ng benefit, ang benefit na yon ay kasiyahan, no? Happiness, welfare ang tawag natin generally, pero essentially welfare. Meron tayong ano diyan technical terms sa economics, ang tawag doon ay utility na later on sa ating pag-aaral muli kong babalikan. Pero sa ngayon, tawagin muna natin siyang kaligayahan or kasayahan. No? So ang isang tao ay engage in any activity dahil meron siyang expectation ng kaligayahan. So ang gusto niyang mangyari actually is ma-maximize ang kasiyahan na yon. Ano? Kung maabot ang pinakarurok ng kanyang kaligayahan, ika nga. Yun naman ang objective ng bawat isa, di ba? Maabot ang rurok o ang dulo, ang pinakamataas. Ganun din man ang firm. Pero ang firm, ang tawag natin sa kanyang welfare ay profit. Okay. Now, wala naman kasi ibang magpapaliga. Ang firm ay hindi naman isang entity na ipinanganak o yun, nagkakaroon ng welfare kung merong altruism or kung merong mga taong na merong what do you call this, merong participation sa isang social activity. Ang firm ay ang welfare ng firm ay nabubuo kapag nagkakaroon siya ng profit. Okay. So ang tanong na sasagutin natin is papaanong itong mga layunin na ito ng maximo rurok ng kaligayahan at rurok ng kanyang kapakinabang or profit, how will this objective be attained? What are the considerations? Of course, these are general questions na sasagutin natin in more technical detail later on. Okay. So, itong dalawang objectives na to at yung in other words, itong dalawang tanong na to, ang basis ng supply and demand and how they manifest and intersect under different situations. So, narinig nyo na naman siguro ang konsepto ng demand and supply. So, hindi naman ito iba sa inyo. Itong basic questions na pinakita ko kanina, yan ang basihan sa pagbuo natin ng supply and demand. Particularly, pag-aaralan natin yung demand and supply curve kasi yun yung paraan natin para maintindihan natin itong konsepto ng supply and demand. Okay. Now, pag-aaralan natin bakit ang korte o bakit pataas. Ang korte ng supply curve ay pataas at ang korte ng demand curve ay pababa. Pag-aaralan natin yan ng mas maraming detalye. At dahil may isang pababa, may isang pataas, hindi maiiwasan, at yun naman talaga ang objective, na sila ay mag-intersect o sila ay mag-cruise. Okay, so anong ibig sabihin kapag nag-cruise sila? Okay, now mula sa microeconomics na pag-aaralan natin dito sa pinag-aaralan natin, mayroong ibang mga subfields ng economics. Okay, so meron tayong labor economics, industrial organization, public finance, environmental economics, etc. Ang lahat ng mga itong anak ng microeconomics ay essentially application lang ng mga teorya at ng mga principles na pag-aaralan natin sa microeconomics. So mula sa klaseng ito o sa klaseng 100.2 at sa Econ 102, magsasanga ito, no, mag-branch out ito into specific subfields of study such as labor economics, which is the study of behavior of the labor sector, no? Demand and supply for labor. Industrial organization, ito naman yung paanong organize o paanong nabubuo ang isang ekonomiya. Monopoly ba yan? Oligopoly, etc. Anong behavior nitong mga firms na ito, na isang monopolist, isang may mga bagay pa yung monopolistic competition, merong oligopolist, and so on. Public finance behavior ito ng gobyerno. Paanong nag-disperse, anong objectives o anong mga pamamaraan ng behavior essentially, no? Anong kinikilos ng isang gobyerno sa paggamit ng resource na tinatawag na public funds. Alright, so dito sa pag-aaral ng public finance, ang tinitingnan dito ay yung scarce resource na tinatawag na public funds. O ito yung pera ng gobyerno na kinokolekta mula sa taxes. Meron ding pag-aaral ng environmental economics. Ito ang aking field of specialization. Ito ang pagsusuri sa mga problema at sa mga issues sa natural environment sa pamamagitan ng principles na nagmula sa microeconomics. Okay, so upang maintindihan ang behavior, kailangan kayo ng mga nag-aaral nito ay merong imagination and logical reasoning. Hopefully meron kayong empathy. Kasi ang empathy ang makatutulong sa inyo sa pag-unawa, sa pag-intindi ng mga bagay, mga sitwasyon na pag-aaralan natin sa klase. Okay, so bakit kailangan ng imagination? Kasi marami sa mga sitwasyon na to ay hindi nangyayari sa inyo. Hindi naman kayo firm, for instance. No? So, pero kailangan imagine niyo, kailangan yung pag-isipan at para ilalagay ang sarili nyo sa sitwasyon ng isang firm. Hindi rin kayo gobyerno, di ba? Pero kailangan yung isipin, kailangan yung imaginein, pag-isipan at gamitan ng reasoning as if kayo ay gobyerno o as if kayo ay firm. Alright, syempre, parang pag-aartista yan. No? You take on a role. You can't really be a good actor or you can't really be a good performer if you don't have empathy, because you won't be able to understand what that person, what that character is trying to portray. Ganun din naman. You can't really understand what the firm is going through if you don't have some sense of what they're thinking. You know, what are the leaders, the managers of a firm are trying to achieve. So hindi naman talagang mahirap ang microeconomics in the true sense of the word na marami siyang math. Nahihirapan siguro yung iba kasi maybe kulang sa empathy. Kulang sa imagination, and I can't imagine that kulang kayo sa logical reasoning. But the imagination that's required for you to understand and study and keep up with the class and the lesson isn't going to be that deep. No, hindi naman kayo hindi naman kayo method acting, hindi ito method acting, hindi ito immersion talaga. But really kailangan lang talagang meron kayong exposure, meron kayong empathy talaga. So siguro this is the time that you try and sharpen your empathy kung wala kayo noon. Kasi mahalaga din naman ang empathy kahit nasa labas ng microeconomics, because this is the one that will help you become help you become kinder and less cruel. Right? I think people that have no empathy are the most cruel of them all. Okay. All right. So concepts to know or review for the class. You have to understand what graphs are. You have to understand what functions are, a slope, curve, and versus a line. Okay, so that's the introduction to microeconomics. Let's proceed to chapter 2, which is the beginning. Talaga ito na yung umpisa ng ating pag-aaral. No? So balikan natin yung tatlong types ng economic organization: command economy, pure market economy, and mixed economy. All right, so isa-isahin natin na mag-take off tayo sa mixed economy kasi yun naman talaga ang prevailing na tipo ng modern economy. So tulad ng sinabi ko noon, the mixed economy is the combination of command and control and pure market economy. So in a mixed economy, individuals participate in market activities within government regulations, taxation, and government programs. And as I said, most, if not all, of modern economies are mixed. Right? So, of course, may existing pa na command and control, like our command economy. Tawagin na lang natin command economy. Ang mga communist na bansa ay command. Kasi kapag sinabi natin command economy, the decision-making, how to answer the 3 questions, what to produce, how to produce, and for whom, those questions are answered by a central agency that makes all of these decisions. Now, communism is a type of command economy. A dictatorial type of economy is also Is also command economy. Mixed economy naman ay what prevails in the mixed economy really is still the market. Kaya lang the market activities are performed within government regulations. Later on, pag-uusapan natin, bakit kailangan may government regulations? Ano ba ang papel na ginagalawan o tinatampukan ng gobyerno sa isang market economy? Kasi in pure market economy requires very, very ideal conditions. No, 'di ba? Yung mga na equal in power, equal in political power, equal in size, they have all the same information, and everybody expresses his or her, both individuals and firms, the benefits that they get from and all the costs uh, that they incur when they either consume or produce the good. But the real world is less than ideal, as you all know, as we all know. The real world is less than ideal. People lie. People try to intimidate others. You know, people are entities. People, either individuals or groups of people, try to deceive other people. And as a result, if these things happen, the pure market economy can't work, because the assumption behind pure market economy is that people are essentially equal and honest. Unfortunately, we can't really say that about the real world. As such, the government is required, or is a necessity, because the government steps in and declares if anyone lies, they'll go to jail. So the government forces the issue. The government creates regulations to force the issue. Now, the government, because also one of the functions also of government is because the market economy does not have a heart. You know, the market doesn't have a heart. It only operates and guided by the principle of welfare. All right, but it doesn't tell you. It will produce whatever good there is a demand for. So ibig sabihin, how is the demand expressed in the market? Through the purchasing power. But purchasing power is not, again, in the real world. So that only assumes, or that assumes, that everybody has purchasing power. Again, in the real world, that's not true. So there are poor people in a country, in a community. So their happiness or their welfare is never communicated in the market, because they don't have purchasing power. Again, because of this situation, the government has to step in. They have to represent these marginalized individuals or marginalized sectors. And they will be the voice, they will, as a, no, as a representative, no, they will be the voice of these people in the market. So the government participates in market activities as a consumer representing the marginalized. That's why, again, in a mixed economy, the government has presence, because this time the government represents the marginalized, or those who don't have power, meaning the government will buy what they need for them. How? Through taxation. So government has programs, to benefit those that can't afford it. Kaya may libreng eskwela, may libre or very cheap. No? Hindi naman lahat kasi libre. There's free education or subsidized education. There's subsidized food, subsidized healthcare or free healthcare, etc. So it signals the market na, oh, I need healthcare. But the government tells the market, I need healthcare, produce. And there will be a response, again, from suppliers. And as long as there's a buyer, if they build, they will come. If there's money, there's going to be honey. So kapag ka merong demand, merong nagsasabing bibili ako, merong magpo-produce. May makaka-imbento ng isang bagay that will satisfy the demand. Alright. So ngayon, dahil may government na siyang bibili para doon sa mga walang pera, kailangan niyang mag-tax. So sinong tataksan niya? Well, iba-ibang klase ng taxes na pag-aaralan din natin. Merong individual income tax, meron din namang taxation on exports, meron taxation imports, meron taxation on taxes on commodities, yung tinatawag na sales tax, and so on and so forth. The objective of which is, first, is to generate revenue, but there is a second objective which we will study later on, which is to shape behavior. Taxation and subsidies are also used by government to shape behavior. Pag-aaralan natin yan later on because that's quite interesting. Right? Kung paanong nagagamit ng taxes and subsidies to shape behavior of individuals. So, okay. So, what is the market and the market mechanism? Market is an institutional mechanism through which buyers and sellers interact to determine prices and to exchange goods, services, and assets. Okay, so the market is it's an institution, there's not necessarily a place na may tinatawag na market, although tinatawag kasi natin na market yung palengke. That's actually, I guess, a tactile representation of the market. Kasi by itself, market is a mechanism. It's an institution. Right? It's an institutional mechanism. Meron siyang manifestation ng physical market, yung palengke. Meron din namang stock market na kung saan stocks are traded. But the very basic idea behind the market is it is an institutional mechanism that facilitates buying and selling. And by buying and selling, the price of the good is determined. It is through the bargaining between the players, between the buyers and sellers, that the price of a good is determined. Okay, and it is through this price that the exchange of goods, services, and assets are agreed upon. All right, so it is the price that will determine also how much volume of goods and services will be traded, because at the end of the day, how much of a good is going to be sold is going to be determined by the price of the good. Okay, a market is characterized by numerous businesses and buyers that engage in voluntary trade. Now, remember this word voluntary. In a market economy, trade is voluntary. Kaya mixed economy kasi the government steps in to make sure that no one is coerced into trading. If people don't want to trade, don't want to buy a good, and they only want to buy 10, let's say 10 goods, or they only want to sell 10 goods at that price, then ideally there is no political power, there's no harassment and all. Then the voluntary trade works. But in the real world, wherein there's a lot of shenanigans that happen, the government steps in to make sure that these things don't happen so that the market functions properly. All right, so the objective of players, buyers and sellers, when they engage in trade, is to improve their economic situation. When I say economic situation, not their financial situation, there's a difference. There's a difference between financial situation and economic situation, because the economic situation, in essence, only pertains to, it's a more general term, no? It pertains to welfare. And of course, financial situation is one indicator of welfare. Pero yung happiness, essentially, economic situation is, when we talk about that, it's really yung happiness or profitability of a firm, or happiness of a consumer or profitability of a firm. Okay, so a market is characterized by pure voluntary, no coercion, with the intention of earning and improving welfare. That is enough motivation to participate in trade. So people engage, or people use the market on the institutional mechanism in order to improve their welfare through trade. All right, and the market is coordinated by a system of prices. Okay, now what is a market economy? Excuse me. Now, market economy is a complex and elaborate system and mechanism of coordination between consumers and firms using a system of prices and bargaining. Now, so, huwag niyong kakalimutan mga keywords na matatandaan niyo. Prices, bargaining. All right? Coordination, consumers and firms. These are keywords that are associated with the market or the market economy. Okay. Next line, no single individual is responsible for production, consumption, distribution, and pricing. In other words, in a market economy, there is not one individual or just even a group of individuals that will dictate what will be the quantity of production, how much will be consumed, how it will be distributed, and what the price will be. Excuse me. These things, production, consumption, distribution, and pricing, these are all results of bargaining and dynamics, interaction between all of the individuals that participate in trade. Okay, so the market economy it's elaborate because there's a lot of coordination, there's a lot of interaction between all of these individuals. No? So it's an elaborate system. It's a mechanism of coordination. Okay? Now, there is a market for most things. When I say most things, there are some things that cannot be traded in the market or cannot be traded using the mechanism of bargaining and interaction between buyers and consumers. These markets or these goods are called, and we will study these also later on, they're called non-market. Ayan, ba't pa ganito to? Market goods as opposed to market goods. All right. Pero most things are present in the market. At least most things that we use, that we consume, that we're familiar with. But there are certain things though that cannot be traded in the market because of the characteristics of the good. They can't be traded. So there are certain characteristics of a good that are required for it to be tradable, for it to be something that can be bought and sold. There's some goods that don't possess those characteristics. They're called non-market goods, something that we will also study later on. So in the market, there is no entity that designs a market, and it is shaped by players in the market. Excuse me. So a modern market is something that you're all familiar with. No? Pero it's useful to understand the history of the modern market. So in the beginning, market was simple with bargaining done face to face. So essentially, people, ito yung barter. Essentially, people met with each other. They bring their goods, and then they bargain. No? So, but in the beginning, kasi wala din naman yung walang pera pa, no? Everything was just traded. That the barter ang tawag, diba? So in modern times, however, the market doesn't have to be face to face. Obviously, the last 2 years is a testament to this, no? So we still had trading during the pandemic, wherein everything was shut down. No? We couldn't really move as we didn't have mobility, we didn't have that opportunity to really interact. Nagsara mga palengke nun, if you recall, no? But for a time, nagkaroon ng issue kung paano pang may mga bagay na kakailanganin sa pang-araw-araw na pangangailangan, pero hindi na maaaring bilhin kasi sarado ang mga tindahan physically. But through the internet, maaari pang gawin yun, yung tinatawag na virtual market. No? So nagkaroon pa rin ng trading through the internet. Of course, there is an actual market which can either be centralized or decentralized. So pag sinabing decentralized, ibig sabihin hindi isang area lang kung merong market, but marami sila, no? Na yung activity ay hindi sa isang lugar lamang o sa isang sitwasyon lamang, kundi marami. So decentralized siya. Meron din namang mga ito yung very very special, ito yung financial market na kung saan ang trading is done somewhat semi-physical kasi merong isang trading may trading area, no? May let's say yung securities yung stock exchange, no? Kaya tawag siya stock exchange kasi stocks are exchanged. That's a stock market. Alright. So ang tinitrade lang doon ay financial instruments, which is a special type of a good. Kasi normally ang sinasabi natin, di ba, yung goods and services, yung final goods and services. But this is a special type of good. It's a financial goods. They're financial instruments and financial assets are traded. But the basic mechanism is the same. There is buying and selling. Kaya lang dito, di ba, pagka may broker na tinatawag, siya yung nagre-represent ng interest ng buyers and sellers. Merong isang tao na meron siyang portfolio, no? Meron siyang nire-represent niya, let's say, mga stocks ng iba-ibang mga kumpanya. Meron din naman siyang nire-represent ng mga individuals na gustong bumili ng stocks. No? Meron pa ngayon yung Bitcoin na, yung cryptocurrency. Not sure how to identify that kasi it's a financial instrument as well. No? Kaya lang hindi din siya traditional na merong stock market. although it is traded through the internet, no? So I guess that's going to be an extension of the financial market now. Kasi dating financial market, the extent of the use of the internet in the financial market is for people to do it themselves, but essentially it's still the stock market. But this time, the cryptocurrency is traded a little bit differently than the ordinary financial instruments. Okay, so so what is the price? And I have no idea bakit ang baba nito. All right. Ay nako. Anyway, so what is the price? The price, the market price, is a signal to producers and consumers regarding how a good is regarded in society. So the price tells you whether something is precious or not. Okay, so diba, meron pang word the priceless. Wala nang sobrang laki ng sobrang halaga niya, wala siyang price. Okay, that's exactly not accurate. It just means that the price is high, not very high, or hindi mabigyan ng halaga. Now, the price is often mistaken for value. There is a difference between the two. Price is something that comes out, or that's determined through the bargaining between buyers and sellers. The value of a good is intrinsic, something that the people people value something, and they express the value of a good, but that's not related to the price. For instance, let's say something that let's say meron kang isang locket ng nagawa sa tanso. So hindi siya mahal. Wala, hindi siya mamahalin. Gawa lang siya sa tanso. Now, ang presyo nitong locket na to, yung ganitong klase ng locket, ganitong size, ganito yung features, ganito yung bigat, etc. Kapag traded in the market yan, that's probably maybe going to be 500 pesos. Isang locket siya na may design, etc. If it's traded if it's traded, the same thing. Kaya lang, itong particular locket na meron ka, ay minana mo pa sa yung kanununuan sa lola mo at mahal na mahal mo ang lola mo. As a result, ang value ng locket na to ay more than 500 kasi willing ka to pay kahit 10,000 pesos for this locket. So the value of the locket because of its history is 10,000 pesos, but the price of the locket, if traded in the market, is only 500. So there is difference, the basic difference. It's not necessary. In many cases, if you're just talking about generic goods and services, they're pretty much the same price and value. You can calculate the value based on the price. But if we're talking about generally or goods that may have history and so on, then there's a difference between the two. Okay. So price also contains information about the scarcity of the good, as well as trends that characterize the good. So the price, as I said, comes out of the bargaining between buyers and sellers, but also the price gives us or sends information about how rare the good is, how scarce the good is, because a good that has obviously use, that it must have use. No? Otherwise, wala siyang price pa din kasi no one wants to buy it. So, but if the good has use and there's a lot of demand for it, so it meaning its scarcity is pretty high, no? Kasi the demand is much higher than the supply, then the price of the good is going to be higher. So we know that a good is getting more scarce if the price of that good is rising. Okay? All right. Now, so related to what we've talked about, so we know what price is, then let's talk about market equilibrium. Pag sinabi ng market equilibrium, tandaan nyo, ang pinag-uusapan natin, market dito, and these are all the characteristics and concepts that are related to market. So price is a concept, what a market is, who are the players, buyers and sellers. Those are concepts related to the market. The next concept that you need to understand is called the market equilibrium, or this is the balance or state of rest between the desire of buyers and the ability and willingness of suppliers to satisfy the desire of consumers. So medyo abstract yung kanyang definition, but you have to imagine what it means. Pag sinabing state of rest, this is a perfect balance between the desire of buyers and the willingness and ability of suppliers to sell. So this is a state of rest between buying and selling. All right, so the quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied. All right, so essentially, that's market equilibrium. All right, so now let's go back to the three economic problems and how the market answer responds to that. Okay, so first is what to produce. This is determined by the money votes of consumers. So what to produce, the market asks, ano ba to produce ko? Ano bang sabi ng mga, when I say the market asks, meaning the agents that comprise the market, in this case, the firms are asking, what will I produce? And this is answered by consumers. Then they say, oh, I want you to produce this. I want you to produce cell phones. Okay, but how will they signal the producers that they want cell phones? It is through money votes. So I have money, I have purchasing power. I want you to produce cell phones because I will buy them. So this money vote serves as a signal to producers regarding priorities in production. So ibig sabihin, if the firm is trying to determine, ano bang produce ko? Ano objective uli ng firm? To make a profit. Okay, so it wants to do something, it wants to engage in activity so that it can improve its profitability. So it wants to make money. So it asks, anong produce ko? At sasagot ngayon ng consumers. Ano man objective ng consumer? To be happy. So the consumer, engages in soul searching and decides, I want a cell phone. Okay, so now it sends a signal to producers, I want cell phones. So cell phones will be produced. Perhaps over food. Kasi biglang, ang konti na nagde-demand ng pagkain. Sige, cellphone na lang muna. Or mas maraming cellphone ang ipoproduce natin kaysa pagkain. That can happen. Okay. The second question that's determined by the market is how to produce. Okay. So now that I know what's in demand, I need to know how will I produce this. So this is determined by competition among the different producers. Competition, ibig sabihin, each possible firm or possible supplier is going to compete among each other in delivering the most number of the most amount of goods at the cheapest price. But when they try to outdo each other, dito yung competition, they're trying to outdo each other by offering the lowest price. In order to come up with the lowest price, you have to be really efficient. You have to find the best technology, and you have to find the correct combination of inputs that will produce the maximum amount of quantity of production. Kasi hindi lang iisa ang paraan to produce a good. Maraming mga pamamaraan. Depende sa combination ng labor, capital, inputs, etc. No? So ang objective ng firm is to be able to produce the goods at the lowest price. So it means they have to reduce the cost, or they have to produce at the least cost possible. So guided by the fact that the best way to compete is by keeping costs to a minimum. When I say compete kasi, it means that they want to sell at the lowest price. Right? So question, what if there is unfair competition? What if inherently there is a situation of unfair competition? Maaaring, let's say, ang isang firm lang ang may access to a certain type of resource. Alright? So siya lang. So ibig sabihin, wala nang ibang maaaring makapag-produce nung produkto na yon except for one firm kasi siya lang ang may access. In that situation, the market fails. And this is a situation where the government steps in, okay, or tries to correct it. Now, of course, maraming issues yan kasi paano kung may property rights yung firm doon sa resource na yon, then hindi mo pwedeng puwersahin. No? So may ibang mamamaraan na maaaring gamitin in order to regulate. Okay, for whom? So pangatlong tanong, how does the market answer the question for whom? Who can buy or who will have access to the good is determined by who has the purchasing power. So it goes back to question number one, what will be produced? This is signaled by the money votes. Of course, if you have the money vote, then the product was produced for you. Which consumers will have access to the good depends on income. Depends on. Naman ang ating grammar dyan. Depends on income, or one of the factors would be income. Okay, nababother ako dahil OC ako. Ay, visit. Wala. Depends on income. Alright. Which in turn is depends on factor prices, which in turn is determined by market for factors of production. So later on, pag-aaralan naman natin, kasi isa sa mga offshoot ng microeconomics ay yung income determination. So who will have access to the goods would depend on the people's or the person's income, and the person's income in turn is dependent on factor prices. Ibig sabihin, factor prices o yung prices ng factors of production. So yung owners of factors of production will have income. An individual owns a factor of production. Which one? Labor. All right. So labor, the price of labor is called wage. So in this case, yung buying power ng isang consumer depends on his wage. One of which, kasi maaari naman siyang may iba pa siyang financial assets. Okay. So this question of for whom is a distribution issue. How do we distribute goods and services? Okay. So question, what if people don't have income but need food and shelter? All right. Then the government steps in, and this is public finance or public economics, and tinatawag na public goods or supply of public goods na pag-aaralan din natin later on. Okay, so what are the basic factors that shape an economy? All right, so tandaan na. So we understand the market now. Now we look at the specific factors that shape an economy. One is taste and preference. Okay, this will determine where on the PPF the economy will be. So alam natin yung what does the PPF represent? Essentially yung production aspect. Alright. Ang question is, where on the PPF will the economy produce, or what would be the combination of guns and butter that will be produced? And this is determined by taste and preference. Ano bang, mas gusto ba ng tao guns or mas gusto nila butter? Kung meron silang preference for butter, then more butter will be produced and less guns. All right. So the other is technology and resources. So this will determine the shape and size of the production possibilities frontier. Right. Okay. Now, how does the market result in consumption and production efficiency? This is the basic question you could ask. And for this, now this is going to be the last slide. The answer, partially the answer is presented by Adam Smith and the Invisible Hand. Now, sino si Adam Smith? He was an 18th century Scottish economist who wrote The Wealth of Nations. And he is considered the father of economics. Kasi mula sa kanyang mga pananaw, sa kanyang mga itinuro, sa kanyang mga naisip, yung fundamentals ng economics ay nabuo. Okay. So in his book, The Theory of Sentiments, Adam Smith proposed the idea of the invisible hand. The invisible hand essentially is a characterization of the free market. And according to this, free markets are self-regulating, and it is guided by self-interest, competition, supply, and demand. Parang masakit sa tenga yung idea ng self-interest, but really, what it means is that people are trying to be as happy as possible, and so they engage in activities that will improve their happiness or their state of happiness. Okay, so next time when we meet next Tuesday, we will talk more about this idea of the invisible hand. Why? If free markets are self-regulating, so ibig sabihin, if we have free market, then there's no need for government. Kaya lang, the truth of the matter is that that government is needed in modern economies. So, take-off point natin yung market, the free market, which is characterized by Adam Smith invisible hand. you don't need government kasi the free market is self-regulating because of self-interest, competition and supply and demand. So kaya nang mag-regulate ng market on its own. Kaya lang in current times, because of certain imperfections, then the government has to step in. And next time, we're going to talk about what are the imperfections of the market. So read ahead, and we end here. Okay? I'll see you all on Tuesday. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes? Okay, goodbye. Have a good weekend. All right, Patricia, Eddie, and Ralph, salamat ulit. And I'll see you. Medyo kinulang ako sa slides. I mean, kinulang. I was intending to teach 5 more slides, pero habol ko na lang sa Tuesday. Salamat ulit, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Sige po, sir.
Sige, sir.